welcome return, obviously, for the Women's World Championship last week, first in over 2 years. Where does the women's game go from here?
I think it continues to progress. And I should mention as well a shout out to the other title winners that we haven't mentioned. Eleanor Kearns winning the Girls World Championship. That's the first ever Girls World Championship. And Bradley Roche from the Netherlands winning the boys event. So congratulations to both of those. But yeah, I think the Women's World Championship, that was something that coming into this tournament, coming into the Lakeside, was generating a lot of interest. And Bo Greaves and Mikuru Suzuki, those were the two ladies at the top of the betting, if you like. That those were the two favourites. They didn't play each other in the end, but yeah, there was a lot of excitement about the Ladies World Championship coming back. And I think as well the prize fund as well, because we know it's been said quite a few times now that the last BDO World Championship, that prize fund was cut dramatically, not just the men's event but also the ladies event as well. And I think the total prize fund was £20,500. Well, Bo Greaves has just pocketed 25 grand, and that's a record for this tournament. And even the runner-up, Kirsty Hutchinson, 12.5 grand, which is more than what the winner of the last Lakeside 2019 got. So I think it's been great to see this tournament come back, and also some of the new players that we've maybe not seen before. Like with the men's event, we talked about how there was a lot of new faces, a lot of people making that World Championship debut. And that was the same with the ladies one as well. And okay, yeah, there was maybe some of the ladies that turned up and didn't produce their A game and will probably go away a bit disappointed with how they've played. But you've got to say that it's a first go at a World Championship for them, a first attempt at playing in front of the cameras, playing on a stage like that. And I think it's only going to benefit them going forward. And with that extended field of 24 players, we did get to see a lot of new faces, and some of them as well, they certainly caught the eye. And one we've got to mention, Veronica Ihash from Hungary, getting that 164 checkout, the highest ever checkout in a Women's World Championship at Lakeside. And she was the only one to take a set off Bo Greaves, as we've mentioned. So she deserves a mention as well. And a couple other players as well, Suzanne Smith, Joe Clements, they played in the first round. They're two players that are in the top 8 of the WDF rankings heading into this tournament. Two players that we didn't know much about, but they served up a really good game, and the averages were in the mid-60s, but it was a really entertaining watch. One of the best games I saw on the opening weekend. But yeah, just to see this event back up, I think is a great sign for the ladies. And you've also got to say as well, some of these players that we have seen, maybe they're going to get the bug to play a little bit more this year. Some of them would have qualified via their regional rankings, so they wouldn't have done too much travelling to get in, but maybe we'll see them come back and play some of the bigger WDF events, and even the women's series as well. I know there's a lot of interest heading into that next women's series at the end of this month. Who are we going to see play? Because the last one, I think we saw around 100 players in it, which was a record. Hopefully we're going to see a lot of these players that we saw at Lakeside give it a go as well. And again, the more times we see these ladies go up against each other in competition, I think is only going to help raise the overall standard of the ladies' game.
Yeah, it's a tough question to know where the women's game goes from here, because there's really two organizations that now are trying to put on the best events for women. It's almost like the split in darts from 30 years ago, except it's on the women's side as opposed to the men's side. But they're not competing against each other, and that's the difference. They're both trying to promote the women's game and grow the women's game more than anything through putting on needed events. The PDC, obviously, as we've had guests on before, say do it at such a professional level that they're not used to having seen before. And the WDF, through its various member organizations, just are able to put on events every weekend all around the world. But with that, because they're both sometimes going head to head on a given weekend or a given week, you will end up with like what we saw before, where Bo Greaves did not go and play the women's series, and a few of the other top players didn't, because it was the same weekend as the Isle of Man. And because the two aren't really competing with each other, I think there should, and hopefully will in the coming years, be some level of coordination where the WDF does not have one of their flagship, or at least assure to the best they can that none of their member organizations have one of their flagship Category A events going on at the same time as a women's series, and PDC vice versa. And it would require some level of coordination going into any given calendar year as they prepare the fixtures for the year to make sure that we minimize that. Obviously, there will be events going on opposite one another at certain times because, well, there are events going on all over the world. But there shouldn't be the Category A events, certainly not a major event going on at the same time as the Women's Series and the PDC when they have the Women's World Match Play in July. That shouldn't be going on opposite one of the WDF's major events. Because we want to have the best players playing against each other, because that's how they will grow. Fallon Sherrick doesn't get better from playing, I won't mention any names, but players who are ranked 20-somethings in the WDF. That's not going to help her. What's going to help her, alongside obviously challenging herself in the World Series events and other events against men, is playing people like Bo Greaves and Lisa Ashton as much as she can. So some coordination is needed to grow the game. I think what we're at the point now where the women's game goes from here is that you have two organizations who are, for the first time, really looking out for women's starts and are trying to grow the game. Because on the WDF side, just financially, the biggest draw of the players who are going to be playing in it are the female players. If you can get Lisa Ashton and Fallon Sherrick to show up, people are not going to be tuning in to watch any of those men's players more often than not, because they are, relatively speaking, unknown amateurs. The names that are playing in the WDF are the top female players. And on the PDC side, they're seeing, obviously, there is some financial potential for the growth of women's game. The two organizations, though, need to work together to make sure that the best players are playing each other as often as possible, which means not putting on events that will detract from each other as off whenever they can avoid it. That's where the women's game goes from here. There needs to be some level of coordination, and there needs to be this continued commitment on both sides. I think that second thing is there, but the coordination isn't, and that risks losing out on opportunities, both within the PDC umbrella and in the WDF umbrella, for those players to continue to progress and to challenge the top men and the top, well, everyone in the world.